Right, let's wait for a couple of seconds to a minute for our attendees to join in. I can see a lot more that's coming in right now. So just a minute and we'll get things rolling in a short while. Thanks for waiting. All right, let's get things started. A good day to everyone. I can see that there's quite a lot of attendees today. Thanks for joining us. And yep, as you can see, the topic speaks. Ransomware should be no stranger to anyone, right? So I guess you guys have attended numerous events and webinars about ransomware. But I would say the first step to tackling ransomware is about keeping yourself updated. And of course, with that, we have compiled good contents with the latest trend and technologies that we are looking at. What are bad actors up to, and what are the good defenders, like our speakers over here. I'll introduce them in a short while. This is exactly what we're prepared for you. All right, great speakers line up. Two great speakers. I feel shy in promoting myself that way. I'll come back in later on again to close up the session with a presentation from Veeam and how we can help you tackle ransomware too. All right, so I've forgotten to introduce myself. I'm right in the middle of the screen over there. My name is Raymond. I'm part of a system engineering team for Veeam Software, APJ. Okay, so let's start off with a bit of a housekeeping. All right, you guys are intentionally put on mute. You can speak through, literally speak through the Q&A box if you have any questions at any time throughout the session, or you can chat with our guys if it's non-questions related with regards to you're not hearing us well, or there's some discomfort. You try to make things as comfortable as for you as possible, right? And to make this webinar exciting, I should say rewarding. We have these giveaways for the 30, I would say the fastest respondents into the questionnaire at the end of the event, okay? And you got to make sure that you stay throughout the session with our speakers, because answers are given directly during each of their sessions. So the first 30 completed and correctly answered questions, the answer to the questions, will get a 30 only limited edition hoodie giveaway. All right, so let me get the ball rolling with one of our customers, Morehouse School of Medicine, which is located in Atlanta, Georgia. They are part of the faculty, or they call it the medical education program at the Morehouse College. If you look at the highlight of this particular quote from our customers with regards to defending against cyber threat, right? One of the things that we learn over here is the IT teams needs to be 24/7. I'll say 100% or even 200% alert all the time, and they cannot let any slip through the cracks at all, right? When it comes to tackling the cyber threat. And how are they able to do that? They have tons of things that they have to do, right? Not just with regards to the cyber threat, but their daily routine job of helping their users and so on, right? So the need of technology to help them do that is really important, okay? And that's the reason why we have our speakers over here that will help you from a technology standpoint, as well as from a trend standpoint, to update you with the latest information. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, our very first speakers, Jeff Lanza, 20 years of FBI agent in his career, he has a very special skill sets of putting the cyber criminals behind bar for us. So Jeff, I'll pass the floor. I should say I'll pass the screen to you right now.
Okay, Ray, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here tonight. Welcome to the event. Good morning, everyone. It's good evening for me from the East Coast of the United States, but I'm happy to have you here and have the opportunity to present. I'm going to share my screen with you right now and share my PowerPoint slides. Just bear with me for a minute while I share my screen. And I'll bring up my PowerPoint here in just a second. Here we go. Okay, so let me go past those initial slides here. There we go. All right, so here's my first slide. Again, welcome to the event. I spent 20 years with the FBI. For most of my career, I was involved in white-collar crime. Like, that doesn't sound right. I investigated white-collar crime. You know, cybercrime is a big part of the FBI's white-collar crime program, and it's all about how we stay safe from these types of crimes. So I want to talk about a few things that I learned throughout my career and post-career regarding that. But first, I want to back up just a little bit. When I joined the FBI in 1988, the main focus of the FBI was not on cyber criminals. It wasn't an issue back then. It was more on the mafia, the mob. And one of the headlines that I had read when I was a teenager before I joined the FBI in 1978, when I was a teenager, was about a big mob heist at JFK Airport in New York. They didn't rob a business, they didn't rob a bank, they robbed an airport. And in today's dollars, that would be like $22 million, accounting for inflation. And that pales in comparison to the amount of money that's taken from all of us, sometimes willingly from companies that pay ransom to get their computers back, to be able to get up and running again. That's what we're going to cover today. But as a teenager, I read this article, and that's what kind of got me interested in becoming an FBI agent. Now, the mobsters were easy targets back then. You know, when I first investigated the mobsters, when I was a brand new FBI agent, we had a case where a mobster's phone was tapped. Now, there's a learning point here, so watch what happens next. Tony and Joe are talking on the phone. We have their phone tapped. It's an official government wiretap. Tony gets a call from Joe. He says, Joe, I'm really glad you called. Now, remember, we're listening to this. And Joe says, yeah, why? And Tony goes, I have a little problem. I think the FBI is tapping my phone. And Joe goes, well, what are you going to do about it? And Tony goes, well, I got a new number. So lacking any common sense whatsoever, Joe says, okay, good, give me the number. Now, Tony gets some common sense and he says, well, I better not give it to you on the phone. I'll meet you for lunch and I'll give it to you then. And Joe says, I can't meet you for lunch. So Tony says, okay, I'll give it to you now on the phone, but I'll give it to you backwards. He proceeded to give him the 7-digit number in reverse order. And what did the FBI do? We got our best cryptologist on that one right away. We had it figured out in record time, only 6 months, with the powerful computers we had back then. I used this example. It's a true story, not the 6-month part, but to show how important common sense is in helping to prevent in everyday life, but also to help prevent fraud and malware attacks, as people click on the things in an organization that could lead to malware getting on a computer system, a network, and causing these ransomware attacks to occur. You're going to see some examples of that in just a few minutes. Simple things that people could have done and companies could have done that would have prevented these attacks from occurring. Now, let's take a look at another conversation, not a wiretap conversation, but one between an IT professional at a school district in the United States and a hacker. When this person, this IT professional, arrived at work one day at the school district, he saw, excuse me 1 minute as I go back to my slides. What he saw was his computers were locked up. They couldn't do basically anything. They couldn't do student attendance. They couldn't do payroll. They couldn't do anything in the school district. And the first information he got from the hacker was, how many PCs need to be decrypted? And before he even had a chance to answer, the hacker said, just give me 50,000 for all the PCs, 50,000 US dollars, and of course, equivalent Bitcoin of that amount at the time. And the IT professional said, I need to discuss with my boss, and his boss was basically the school board, which immediately approved the payment. But before they had a chance to make the payment, they were able to recover. Now, I'm going to get back to that recovery in just a few minutes. But the hacker also told them, don't call the cops, don't call the police, the FBI, or anybody, because they're not going to help you. If the FBI shows up, if a law enforcement agency in your country shows up, it's too late. It's already happened. So what we're talking about today is prevention, detection, containment if it happens, ejection, and also remediation from those attacks. So I have a few secrets I want to share with you. They may not be secrets to everybody here, but I think these are some things we need to know about that will help us stay better protected against these types of attacks. First of all, they have no fear. They have no fear of getting caught. Most of the criminals that are on the FBI's most wanted list and are on the most wanted list for your law enforcement agencies in Southeast Asia, they're people that are not in the United States. They're not in the countries that you live in. They're not in the victim countries. They're far from the reach of law enforcement agencies, so there's no consequences as they're not going to be extradited to face charges. There's no deterrence, and the crimes continue. And that's the problem we face, is that they have no fear of being caught for the most part. And if you look at some of the attacks that have occurred over the past few years, and we'll just focus on your part of the world, when in Southeast Asia, we have lots of different ransomware attacks across that part of the globe. You can see some examples of that over the past several months. Right? And here's the thing, that they don't just attack countries that you see here on the screen. They're attacking anyone who's vulnerable, and they're sending out broad attacks throughout the world and going after specific companies as well, knowing how crucial their industries are in supply chains or in providing services to their particular their countries and their population. This is the latest report from Kaspersky. We don't have an updated report yet, but we probably get that soon. But you can see the number of attacks, and if you look at this closely, you will see how they kind of parallel the population centers as well. Companies that serve a greater population may be more vulnerable to these particular attacks. And the ransomware families that you see on the screen, the one I want to focus on in just a second is the NetWalker attack, which helps illustrate how the criminals have mutated, just like a virus. They start out with just locking up files and asking for ransom to give you the key to unlock your files. And now they're exfiltrating the data, and they're threatening to release that information publicly if a ransom is not paid. And that's a mutation that has happened more recently. So they can extort you twice, once to give you the key to unlock your files, and another time so you don't get your files and your information and maybe customer data and could be intellectual property released publicly. Two extortions from one attack. And when it comes to NetWalker attacks, if you look at the United States in particular, very vulnerable to this because of all the privacy considerations, not just in the US, but worldwide, but particularly lots of federal and local regulations regarding privacy. And if a criminal got hold of information that was pertinent to individuals' personal information, it's even more crucial that those companies protect that information and not have it released publicly because of various sanctions that would occur. And so they're more likely to pay a ransom. Now, I don't mean to say that none of these people are being caught. In fact, if you look at this slide, this is a press release that went out earlier this year about a Canadian citizen that was extradited to the United States. Now, you don't have to read everything on this slide, but I wanted to show you some key points here. First of all, at the top, you'll see how much money that this particular person gained from these ransomware attacks, $28 million in US dollars, right? This person was prosecuted in Canada and then extradited to the United States. They have an extradition treaty between the two countries, which helps facilitate these types of prosecutions. Most of the attackers are not in countries like Canada. A couple more things to point out here. Number one, the profit incentive is great, as you can see how much money that he had accumulated from these attacks. But what we're looking at here is the NetWalker attack, which I just described, is a double-pronged attack. They're going to not only are they going to lock up your data, but they're going to threaten the release of that data, so they can extort you twice. And then it goes on to say later in the press release that the FBI, I love this statement, they continue to tirelessly identify and locate those individuals who prey on citizens. And that's really, it's a lot of platitude there. I mean, they do that, but what they're really saying here is they can't get all the people responsible for these attacks. It's up to the companies themselves to stay protected and reduce the profit motive, and that's the only way we're going to stop ransomware attacks. As I was saying earlier, in this particular attack, a school district in Nevada refused to pay the ransom, and what happened was they released student data of 300,000 students. These are minors that had their information released publicly. So the hackers do follow through on their promise. As a result of the NetWalker attack, they say, you don't pay the money, we are going to do what we say we do. And all that data was released publicly, which puts those students at risk for a lot more problems, including identity theft and fraud-related problems as well. They're not idle threats. So after that attack occurred, I was interviewed on CNBC as a result of actually another ransomware attack, and they asked me on the show, you know, what do companies need to do to stay safe? And besides that first secret I said, that they have no fear, here's what we need to do. We need to have some fear, but it should be a good fear, and that will help us stay protected. So if we have fear, then we will know that it could happen to us, and we could take steps if we have that fear to stay more protected. So let's go on to this next point. So this comes from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And what you're seeing here is the 2020 report on threats in Southeast Asia. And what you're seeing here is basically the amount of money that they can gain, the profit they can gain from each type of attack. And when you look at the price of crime on the dark web and how much they sell the information for, and it illustrates how profitable cyber crimes can be. And also, it's not just the sophisticated criminals that commit ransomware attacks. It's people that can go online on the dark web and buy kits to commit ransomware attacks themselves. The unsophisticated criminal, which increases the problem for us as potential victims, in that we may not even be able to get our data back if we wanted to recover our files, because they may not even know how to do it, as they're not as sophisticated as the ones that are selling the kits to affect the attacks. So this picture was taken in June 2021 when the President of the United States met with the President of Russia. And it was before the Ukrainian invasion, but there was still a lot of tension in this particular meeting. And one of the things that my president said to Russia's president was the certain cyber attacks should be off limits. And I'm thinking, why certain cyber attacks? Why not all cyber attacks? But you know, they're talking about critical infrastructure and protecting our supply chain and our power systems and our water supplies and our financial systems from attack. But what about the rest of the industries? Can they still just attack them as they want to? So that brings me to my next slide. Who do you think is the more dangerous character on the screen, the one more likely to be involved in some cyber attack? Well, the guy on the left is actually me at the age of 15. I almost look like I can join the mob, not investigate the mob. What I'm talking about now is this guy. His name is Igor. He's currently wanted by the FBI. He is in Russia. And again, he's not going to be extradited to the United States. He's not going to face charges. Won't see a courtroom. There's no consequences. There's no deterrence. The crimes continue. And what is he wanted for? Doing cyber criminal type of stuff, like stealing login credentials and using those to make a profit by selling them to others. And people just like him are committing ransomware attacks outside of the consequences of law enforcement. And these are the people that we're dealing with today. And if Russia agrees not to attack critical infrastructures in the US and other countries, that leaves a whole other area of attack, and that is non-critical infrastructures that affect all of us and businesses that can be subject to these particular attacks. Keep in mind a very key point, that the criminals really only have to be right one time. You know, we have to be right every time in protecting against these attacks. They just have to get lucky we have to be lucky every single time. So take, for example, an email that you might get in your organization. Now, this doesn't make sense really, because if you are going to protect that document with a password, you would send the password by a different means, right? Through a different communication. You wouldn't put it in the document. So this is designed to evade antivirus software, which scans incoming attachments for malware that could be create a ransomware attack or effectuate that. So here we're seeing, it gets by the antivirus software. They can't open the attachment to scan it, and it may reach its way to the end user. If it reaches its way to the end user, how many people in your organization may click on that attachment, which could result in this ransomware malware being launched on an organization and through their network? Password shouldn't be in the document to begin with, right? In the email. There's the embedded malware. This was just an example I found kind of recent about a Singapore attack that occurred. They range from small businesses to medium-sized businesses to large businesses. No one is immune from these attacks. And if you think it can't happen to you, that's when it can happen to you. And when it comes to the Colonial Pipeline attack, which occurred in May of 2021, just about a year ago, we have the CEO of the Colonial Pipeline who was responding to our government's inquiry as to how that attack occurred. Listen to what he said here.
In the case of this particular legacy VPN, it did only have single factor authentication. It was a complicated password, so I want to be clear on that. It was not a Colonial 123 type password.
That's nice. That's nice that they used a strong password, but what are you kidding me? They could have prevented that attack by having two-factor authentication on a legacy VPN system. That would have prevented that attack from occurring. So you see, a big company like that can be victimized. Small companies like I mentioned earlier can be victimized, but simple steps could have prevented a lot of the attacks that have occurred. So what's secret number 3? We should have fear, but we can master the fear. And in doing that, we're going to prevent these attacks from occurring. And mastering the fear does not mean paying the ransom. The Colonial Pipeline attack, this was an affidavit written by an FBI agent, who had found the wallet where that money went to when they paid the $4.2 million. They found it, they traced it, they were able to recover some of it. About $2 million of it was recovered. That's not always going to happen. But paying the ransom is never an answer. In fact, if you pay the ransom, you got lots of problems. Number one, you can't always recover your files. You may not be able to recover them effectively. You're going to get put on a payers list. You're going to pay again if you are attacked again, if you're not ready for the second attack, right? And just encourages the behavior in a more general sense, where more criminals will gravitate to this type of behavior because they know how profitable it is. There's downtime issues. There's more issues that will affect us in the long term, including higher insurance rates as more and more ransom is being paid, and some of that is absorbed by insurance companies. And then finally, just a lost reputation of your business is also a side effect of ransomware attacks as well. Paying the money is never an answer. And also, where the money goes in some cases, it may go to other criminal activities. And if that happens, you're just basically, when you pay a ransom, you're complicit not just in the extortion, but in what future crimes that may be effectuated by the payment of the ransom. So let's go back to this chat between the hacker and the school district. So I mentioned earlier that they demanded $50,000, which is not much money compared to the millions we're seeing paid today. But the school district had discovered an offline backup, an air gap backup that they were able to recover from. The school board approved the ransom payment, but they never had to pay because they were able to recover and get up and running because of this air gap backup. And that's a key point. And if you look at the FBI's website, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the UK website, everyone has the exact same advice, right? Have backups, secure the backups, make sure the backups are air gap protected, keep them separate so they can't be affected by a ransomware attack. Sing Cert says the exact same thing. Practice good cyber hygiene, back up critical data, and make sure that that backup is not connected to the internet or could be affected by a ransomware attack. And you'll be able to recover from that backup in the case that you are attacked. So in a general sense, you'll hear more about this in just a few minutes. But remember this, disaster mitigation and recovery is about prevention, but it's also about detection, containment, ejection, and also remediation. Think about it this way, 3 copies of your files on 2 different medium, 1 offsite, and 0 errors in that backed up copy. You hear more about this in a few seconds from our next speakers. Law enforcement agencies around the world, in summary, talk about air gap backups, training of employees, creating a culture of security, basic things like strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, keeping systems updated, updating incident response plans so you can remediate more effectively, and finally understanding if there's a paradigm shift because the criminals are mutating, and not only are they getting better at what they're doing, they're finding new ways to affect us. So it's not as much as prevention, although we should have prevention. It's also about detection as quickly as possible so we can recover from those attacks. So I'm going to stop right there and turn it over to my next speaker. Thank you for spending time with me tonight. I'll be around for questions at the end.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. It's really insightful with your comments, and I would definitely repeat that 100 times, right? Stop the payment and recover it. So that's the way to go. And you mentioned a couple of really good, I'll say highlights or reminders, right? Ransomware is evolving. They are going into the double threat that you mentioned, right? They encrypt and exfiltrate data. And we do realize that there are also triple threat that's going on, right? There are repeated attacks after that. So getting decrypted data, which is in the hands of the bad actors, and after you're not recovering it, right? They give you a decryption key. You do not know what are hidden in that data after they've encrypted it, and then they decrypt it for you, right? So yep, I think you mentioned also a couple of good points that is also highlighted in one of the reports that I'll share with you guys in a short while. Email phishing will still be the #1 ransomware attacks. You did mention networker. Obviously, there are tools available that make it so easy. You do mention like the multi-factor authentication. I can't imagine any organization that's still on a single factor authentication, right? So it should be double or it should be multi-factor authentication that's going on over there, right? So yep. I'll just end it up with it is not about will it happen, but when will it happen, right? I think everyone is well aware of that with the zero trust strategy that's going on. Thanks, Jeff. If you guys can look at the screen right now, or you are already looking at the screen, right? This is one of our customers in the city of Vincent, which is the local government area of the Western Australia, more towards the Perth side. And what they have a benefit from the technology side of things, right? From a protection standpoint, data protection backup using Veeam software, as well as they do have a partners called Focus Networks that help them in having the end-to-end approach of detecting, a proactive way of detecting the ransomware, as well as if you are being hit, how should you be doing the recovery with the rightful SLA. Time is of essence, right? When you are being attacked by, or you have a cyber threat compromise over there. So yep, having that confidence. So we're going to switch our gear right now into more technology focus, and I would like to introduce our next great speaker from RSA NetWitness, Chongming, to guide us through what they see from a ransomware trend perspective, and he'll go really detailed into some of the aspects of how their technology can help us detect ransomware. Chongming, I'll pass the screen to you right now.
Thank you, Raymond.
Go ahead, Chongming.
Okay, I'm displaying my screen, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, to be with all of you. And let me just make a little bit of an introduction of myself. My name is Chongming. I'm from NetWitness and RSA Business. A little bit on RSA NetWitness. So we have been in the industry for more than 20 years, and we've been introducing cybersecurity solution to help protect our customer. But more importantly, we are on a journey to make your cyberspace a safer one. And at the heart of it, ransomware protection is something that is very, very close to our hearts. And there's a lot of synergy, right, in today's conversation around what Jeff just mentioned, what I'm going to share about, and what Raymond's going to share about in helping you protect yourself against ransomware attack. So let me just start my presentation with this. So on 2nd July 2021, right, while businesses, they had staff either already off work in the US or preparing for a long holiday weekend, a threat actor group called River launched a widespread ransomware attack that got organizations, SOC, and IT teams scrambling. Now, the attack today, you might have heard of it, is known as the Kaseya ransomware attack. Now, this is extremely significant because it involves poisoning a supply chain well. What does this mean? This means that when you compromise the provider in a cyber chain attack, the entire cyber chain is potentially under your control. Imagine the number of organizations or users who could potentially be compromised because of this one single ransomware attack. And to add to that, this is not the first time this has happened. A year ago in 2020, we hear about Sunburst, which gave threat actors wide-ranging access to corporate and government information systems. So you may be wondering, right, a decade later, since ransomware was first prevalent, why is it seemingly still so easy for attackers to compromise organizations? The complexity of ransomware attacks really makes it extremely difficult for us to detect the attack or stop the attack while using signature-based blocking solution. So if protecting your environment is tough, right, and we can see in the use case that I've just shown, or the scenario that I just talked about earlier on, we now need to consider how attacks on our third-party suppliers could potentially affect us. So are we then, today, fighting a seemingly battle that we are always going to lose? And why is ransomware still that prevalent? So in the next 10-15 minutes, right, let me share a little bit of insights around how we see ransomware, and what's our strategy, what's our cybersecurity strategy around ransomware. So there are multiple reasons why ransomware is still prevalent, right? It is prevalent, of course, because it's a very lucrative attack, right? Attackers are getting away with good money, so to speak, right, from these attacks. As Jeff and Raymond mentioned, never pay the ransom, never ever pay the ransom, right? Because we are just fueling the industry, so to speak. Right? But why is it still so prevalent? So apart from the sophistication of attackers, we have and still will be, right? Make no mistake about that, we'll still be struggling with users' problem. So modern phishing techniques are so advanced that even the most conscientious security practitioners today still fall prey to them. Now, let me give you an example, right? How do we expect average user to fare better, right? After all, imagine this. If Jenny's job, right, an employee of yours, Janice, if Janice's job in accountancy is to open up PDF file and process purchase order, right? How can she expect to be able to know on site immediately an extremely well-crafted PDF that may be unsafe and could contain malware? How would she be able to on site be able to do that if the malware evades all of your cybersecurity controls? So user still remains as a big problem. The second problem is, the fact that ransomware are using techniques that are harder and harder to prevent. And these techniques are called living off the land binaries, or LOL bins. And what are they? They are essentially normal administrative tools, well, generally found in Microsoft Windows, right? Tools that you use every day, for instance. So these tools have valid, legitimate purposes and are used every day by your administrators, which makes the detection of malicious use of these tools extremely difficult. How are you going to decipher whether if the use of these tools at a particular time is legitimate or is malicious? Now, it doesn't help that signature-based systems that are used to detect such malicious payloads or malicious executables does not fare very well. Why do I say that? Because even if I know a particular file, right, is malicious, what this system does is it uses signature. It uses signature of these files and tells you whether this file is malicious or not. But we know in today's context that attacker can make changes to this file extremely easily by just changing a small part of the code of the file, and they will evade all of this signature-based detection. Now we need to understand, while we are using the same tools to detect, to protect our environment, we cannot discount the fact that the attackers might be using the same tools to evade detection as well. So are they always a step ahead of us? Not necessarily the case, right? So is this a lost cause? I don't think it's a lost cause here, right? And because then one of the reasons is practitioners today have been advocating for a shift in our response strategy, right? Our response strategy for ransomware, from blocking all of these ransomware attacks to one of detecting, responding, and recovering from ransomware attack. There's a paradigm shift here today, from the notion that we can block all ransomware attack to one that's detecting, responding, and recovering. Now, that's not to say that we can't block ransomware attacks from happening in our environment. That is to say that our security posture today needs to also include the ability to detect, to respond, and to recover as quickly as possible from ransomware attacks when they happen. So this is really best covered by the NIST cybersecurity framework, which details the 5 steps of incident response, which should include the ability to identify threats and assets, protect them by blocking this attack if possible. And should blocking fails, we need to have the ability to detect them through visibility, right? And visibility gives us the ability then to respond with confidence. And lastly, the ability to respond also allow us to recover to a good state as quickly as possible. Now, this set the standard of not just ransomware attacks, but of any cybersecurity threats, right? And when this is applied to our response strategy, you will greatly reduce and possibly even eliminate the threat of ransomware attacks altogether. Now, at the heart of our response to ransomware attack, the objective should always be to have the ability to recover and restore business to pre-ransomware attack stage as soon as we possibly can, right? Why is this the case? Can't we just rely on preventive approach alone, right? Can't we just do protect alone? The answer is no. And in the upcoming slides, I would like to give the audience a short rundown. I'm going to go a little bit more deep dive of an anatomy of a ransomware attack. And this is something that NetWitness have produced from our investigation of ransomware attack that was in the wild. So I will detail on a very high level one of the many attack techniques of ransomware and explain the complexity of them, the challenges in blocking them, and how a posture of detect, respond, and recover can help us manage these threats. Now here you will see 5 key steps of ransomware attack. Starting with the first, attackers need to first steal credentials, and they are leveraging today on different tool sets to evade such detection. Now with credentials stolen, they next need to move within the environment, or we call this lateral movement. This is where they're going to again also use different tool set, right, and gain a foothold on as many assets as they possibly can. They then need to stay within the environment and to remain persistent in the environment. This is where they deploy backdoors, which allow them to be among us in stealth mode. Now, this is where the horror story unfolds. Privileged user accounts are then created by attackers. Last step, the ransomware is deployed. Now, these 5 attack techniques may seem very simple, but in actual fact are extremely sophisticated and to block, right? And if this is the case, right, if it's very difficult to block, is it better for us then to aim for a heightened level of detect and analysis readiness and recovery readiness? Now you'll be asking, why are these techniques difficult to block? I'll explain to them in the next couple of slides by dissecting these techniques. Now let's start with credential harvesting. Within Windows, username and password are stored in memory spaces of a particular process called LSAS. Now, attackers leverage on existing Windows processors, as I mentioned previously, living off the LAN binaries or LOL bins, to extract LSAS memory. In this screenshot, we see the attacker use a legitimate tool such as procdump to open lsas.exe, which is in Windows itself, and dump the memory that is in LSAS containing credentials. And just like this, the memory of LSAS are dumped using legitimate tools. How do we go about blocking this when this is a legitimate tool that's being used, right? Now, this particular credential harvesting, right, will not trigger a signature-based solution to fire an alert. Okay, so but in order for the attacker to extract the credential, attackers still need to use external tool, for instance, and they use tools called Mimikatz, right? But by running Mimikatz in your IT environment, this will definitely trigger an antivirus alert because Mimikatz is known as a tool that shouldn't be used. So what do attackers do? They run them offline to evade AV alerts. Very easily done as well. So looking at this modus operandi, or the way attackers are launching their attack, it's extremely difficult to block them, right? But we can address this through visibility, as you see in the screenshot. We can find out whether if credential harvesting is happening, and this forms an alert, or this forms the start of an entire end-to-end attack that is happening within the environment. Now let me move on to lateral movement, right? To move laterally, attacker will tend to do this slowly, right? It's called slow low-risk attack. And they will use existing tools such as RDP, WMI, SMB. Sounds familiar? Tools that we use, or rather protocols that we use on a day-to-day basis. They will use that to move laterally. And again, these actions are always, more often than not, going to be considered legitimate and not blocked because the users themselves or the administrators in your environment are using these protocols in their day-to-day work. When you access a file share, you're going to use one of these protocols, for example, right? And what we are advocating, or what practitioners are advocating, is achieve visibility into such activities, right? In your logs, in your firewall, in your net flow, and we can see them happening. And again, this will give us evidence and again form a part of the entire chain of attack. Now, the third step, if you remember, is to deploy a backdoor. Now, this is where there is a very remote chance, or there's a chance that antivirus will pick up the backdoor when it matches a signature in the AV engine that is your environment. So imagine when the attacker is trying to install a backdoor or an executable in your environment, your AV may pick this up and flag it out as an alert. Now, a motivated and a very sophisticated attacker will easily basically evade this particular detection, right? Because they know this and they are crafting techniques or backdoors that evades this detection capability. Extremely easy to evade it as well, right? And so in this scenario, the backdoor is deployed and executed, and this gives the attacker the ability to use Windows command such as net.exe to then start doing the fourth step, which is to create an account with privileged access. So if you're familiar with net.exe, again, another legitimate process that's being used, right? And in this case, privileged accounts are easily created. Finally, let me go to the last step to describe the entire attack scenario. This is where ransomware is deployed to carry out its intended outcome. PES exec, again, you may have heard of it, a legitimate Microsoft tool is used to do that, or one of the tools that's used to do that. This is an example of how attackers are using living off the land binaries or existing Windows process or tools to carry out their ransomware attack and evade detection. Now, it's extremely difficult to block them if you look at what I've just talked about in the last 4 to 5 minutes. And if we can't block them, what do we need to do? We need to detect, we need to analyze and investigate, and finally recover from these attacks. And we do so by gaining visibility and creating analytics here. Now, the challenge is to be able to analyze and respond to such ransomware attack, right? The challenge is we need very highly skilled security analysts, which may or may not exist in our organizations. You know, we heard of cybersecurity manpower crunch for the longest of time. Now, this is where NetWinners has been helping our customer globally in this particular space. We have an incident response team that has a global presence, and this team is extremely well versed in incident response and forensic. This is what I call our SWOT team. We help our customer globally with triaging incidents, security incidents, performing forensic on attacks, and provide remediation guidance, right? So that they are able to recover as well. Now, in cases such as ransomware, we have extensive experience in helping customers in the analysis, investigation, and recovery effort via a highly skilled set of cybersecurity practitioners. Now, in the ransomware incident that you saw earlier on, right, the methodology that is adopted is always this. It's always to understand the why the how, and the execution. Okay, so while organizations are doing this on their own, I mentioned about the lack of skill set. Therefore, organizations in this case, very specific to ransomware, are also turning to outsource partner to assist them in providing them with the ability to detect such attacks, while still retaining the initial response responsibility in-house. This is a hybrid approach where detection and outsource initial response is done in-house, with deep forensic investigation finally outsourced, right? So three-step process: detection, outsource; initial response, in-house; deep forensic, outsource. So NetWitness offer our customer a ransomware defense service that collects and analyzes data from their endpoint in their environment. And we do it without the need for you to set up and manage your own infrastructure. All we do is collect data from your environment, and if the exploit were to happen in your environment, the NetWitness incident response team will notify you and give your security team an opportunity to act before ransomware exfiltrates your data or detonates encryption. And if encryption is detonated, we are going to give you all of the context information for you to be better prepared for your recovery steps. So if you are looking for proactive or scheduled threat hunting services, or NetWitness is able to bring in a SWAT team when the ransomware attack happened, we are also able to conduct, for example, tabletop exercise or breach readiness exercise. Or if you would like to conduct half-yearly, yearly assessment of your cybersecurity defense, we have been doing this for our customer globally. So to just kind of conclude, right, I'd like to reiterate on the posture change in our response, incident response strategy. Now we other than blocking, which is still important, don't get me wrong, we need to put a stronger focus on detecting, responding, and recovering. And with NetWitness, we have over 20 years of doing so. I want to end with this, right? So attackers work together, they collaborate together, right? For the longest of time, we have not really been doing a very good job in doing so. But as defenders, and in this case, together with Veeam, right? Together in NetWitness, we are exactly doing that. We are exactly collaborating and leveraging on our own expertise in different areas, as you see in the NIST process, right? To protect your cyberspace and to make it a safer environment for you to operate in. And with that, I'm sure we are all looking forward to Raymond's presentation. And over to you, Raymond, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chongming. Really great information that you mentioned over there, as well as thanks for teaming up the NIST framework, which is also a framework that we are, it's close to my heart, as well as a lot of our organization, of customers has been adhering quite conscientiously with that framework. And what I like about what you mentioned in regards to, it takes technology players, not a single technology players, but a group of them, a consortium of them that comes to solve these big issues of cyber threat, right? And I like to relate that to one of the latest ransomware report. I mentioned that earlier on. I've been nagging on this, but this is one of a great report. And we have surveyed not just the data center administrator, not just the backup administrator, which we usually do in Veeam from our yearly data protection report, another report that I'm highlighting over here. But this particular ransomware report, we actually included the security administrator, as well as the CISO and the executive. We need all the different personas on an organization to come together. At the same time, with vendors like RSA, NetWitness, as well as Veeam, plus many of the other alliances to come together and fight this war that is ongoing, right? So, yep, with that, I think you can, let me just get back my screen over here. Thanks, Chongming, thank you. All right, I guess you guys can see my screen, and again, self-promoting, leaving the best to the last. This is your last line of defense when it comes to the cybersecurity defense strategy, right? Let me just get on to the very first slide and get things running into the depths. So if you look at what are the common grounds that we have with regards to the bad actors and the good defenders that I mentioned right at the start of the webinar, right? One of the most common thing is the bad actors are scaling up. They have the whole global forces with people wanted to attack any organization. They go from all ages, and with that common scale of bad actors out there, at the same time, organizations are increasing their data. That data is growing huge, and data being the core of your assets over there, that is where the center of attack will be, because organizations are concerned with your data, and the data is growing. How are they going to protect every single bits and bytes of their data? I think that's one commonality that we can see from the cyber threat attack coming into, especially ransomware, and coming into protection of data, right? And there's also that simplification part that I mentioned. You have heard Jeff talk about it. You have heard Chongming talk about it. Yep, even tools are sophisticated, but they have been simplified by the community. You guys have heard about ransomware as a service, where you do not need to be an expert, but there are tools available for you as a service for you to try your attack. I even heard comments from a community that their first attack and they got it through. So simplifying tools is also the other way from an angle of protection or the good defenders, right? We need to have a simplified tools that comes together and help your IT team defense of this simplification tools that has evolved through the ransomware years, right? And the last bit of things I would just like to highlight before I go into the details of this will be time is the essence, right? The bad actors are leveraging on time to make you to get the ransom, right, and make the payment, right? So a recovery mechanism also have to be against time to make sure that it's fast. Other than protecting, it has to be fast in terms of recovering your data back to normal or back to operation. So let's take a look at a couple of these things, right? And if you look at the data as a core, as mentioned earlier on, why do you put this, just sidetrack a bit, why do you put this hexagonal shape, right? Hexagonal shape has been the strongest pattern and prevalent, right, in nature, in their efficiency. So that's the reason why you're putting a hexagonal shape. And if you look at the three core attributes of data right now, right? Data is getting critical. We have seen more data than the many years combined together, right? Over the recent last 10 to 15 years, going to petabyte and zettabyte. And at the same time, almost all the data are critical. Almost all your applications and services are critical. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's the growth, hyper growth of data that's coming in. That's creating the challenge of us protecting all the data. That's creating the opportunity for bad actors to come in and attack the data. Right? And that bit on the sprawling over there, as we understand the multi-cloud strategy, the hybrid cloud strategy is a necessity instead of a good to have right now, right? So your data is not just within your own data centers on premises, they are growing across the cloud space. Some call it the super cloud, right? But data are just everywhere. So that creates that challenge of how a strategy should be worked upon, or that defense strategy should be worked upon. So just to give, oops, click it a bit too fast. All right, just to give an idea of how do we tackle or how do we build a cybersecurity defense strategy, starting off with people. So I mentioned earlier on with regards to a group of personas coming together from a human firewall, building a human firewall perspective with the awareness and behavior. That was one of the reasons why we have this webinars, or you've been seeing tons of webinars talking about ransomware. It has to be on the constant update, right? Educating the public, educating your organization, educating your employees out there, right? And on the right-hand side over there, processes in place. I think that's really crucial. You should have a business continuity plan. And some engage in cyber insurance, where they get paid for compromising of the data by cyber threat. Of course, there are clauses over there. It also involved tagging of your assets. You know where your assets is going to. I think from a discovery mode perspective, from that detection, identification perspective as part of the NIST process, right? The design principles will go into, you heard Jeff tee this up for me, 3, 2, 1, in actual fact is 3, 2, 1, 1, 0 rules for backup. I'll just leave this at the back of my mind. I'll explain what that numbers is really important, or it's ultimate rules for backup, but Veeam include a couple more. That 1, 0, which is missing over there, but the 1, 0 that I explained in the short while is crucial when it comes to the ransomware attack against traditional way of backing up your data, right? Privileges, least privileges to start off with, multi-factor authentication that we mentioned, secure by design, keeping it simple. Again, that simplification of things. Last but not least, the technology, authentication. Yeah, you heard about the, I'm repeating that, MFA, authentication, authorization, giving the least rights, and then a combination of tools, right, hardware and software. Okay. So I'll reiterate again as what Chongming has mentioned about the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? And in this framework, you can see the 5 phases of things. A lot of our customers actually follow that for good reasons, right? These are collaboration across industry. Ransomware attacks is across everywhere, right? As you have heard, is widely adopted, is proven, right? Is designed to be a outcome based instead of just regulations to follow or guidelines to follow. So they're outcome based with very specific controls that you can measure the success of the cybersecurity framework. Of course, it uses some of the clauses that are incorporated into the regulations that you have seen over here, right? SP 800, the DoD, RMF, and so on, right? So this is the right framework. If you do not know where to start off with when it comes to ransomware defense mechanism, right? Start off with NIST framework. That will be a good start before you go into the individual process of incorporating the technologies in place, right? So if you look at that, NIST plus Veeam plus security vendors like RSA, NetWitness, this is where we are able to provide that 5 phases of things. And I'll just expand this out. Again, time is the essence. So when it comes to a data protection player like Veeam, we are very conscious when an attack comes in, you will need to have the protection strategy with regards to the recovery point objective that you're looking at over here. Recovery point objective is how much of data loss can you afford when you're recovering the data, right? So that's crucial, right? If your protection of data is good, is timely, but your data has to get back to a month or years back, that's not the right recovery mechanism that you're looking at. So we do have functionalities and features from a protection strategy standpoint that protect with a bit of a detection over there that's linked up to continuous data protection, disaster recovery replication, fast storage snapshot orchestration, local backup into the cloud with immutability, offsite backup. These are the mechanisms, these are the feature sets that we have in our solution portfolio for the protection strategy. And you look at the other part, right, which is really common. RPO and RTO is a common methodology, is a common terms, right, that we are using. Recovery time objective. We need fast recovery, especially when it comes to cyber threat or ransomware specifically. If you look at the instant word over there, we have recovery with regards to minutes or seconds of recovery, instant failover, instant recovery, through the data that's back up in the cloud on premises, through CDP, continuous data protection. At the same time, there is a secure restore. So getting back your data, which is clean data, is of crucial importance, right? So let's dwell in a lot more. So from independent industry analysts, Gartner, protecting your backup, and they have mentioned in their white paper over here, just last year, September, the source from Gartner, harden the backup infrastructure. Very much like you're hardening your OS, your backup infrastructure requires hardening. And what type of hardening is required? Obviously, that operating system that your backup software is residing on, example, Veeam is residing on Windows platform or Linux platform, that has to be constantly updated to the latest patch. Monitoring of your backup policies. We have been promoting what we call policy-based backup solution, moving towards behavior-based backup solution as an intelligent way of managing your backup as well as your data. Okay, so with regards to monitoring your backup, you can get great insights in monitoring your backup for detection of ransomware attacks or cyber threats, right? There's also a separate security context when it comes to your backup servers and storage, mainly to isolate your backup and network, isolate your backup storage into a air gap scenario that you heard Jeff mention earlier on, right? So if you look at that graph over there, backup data has been, apart from your source data that's being attacked, right? Backup data has been one of the key attacks because the cyber criminals out there, the bad actors out there, do realize that backup solutions are stopping them from getting their ransom, right? So threat is introduced on day one, for example. As it moves along, there's a potential of within that 100+ days whereby it's dormant inside there or it's in your backup. At the same time, trying to expand or trying to get out, and there's an actual target they're trying to detect over there, and then the threat is detected. And then you go into the monitoring stages, and you can see the business impact, right? As it goes along, getting higher and higher through the dormant period of this threat tools that's in the backup data. But then that will greatly reduce if you do have the testing mechanism of a clean backup. You do have the fast recovery that greatly drops that restore time to normal operations, right? So it all boils down to the resilient storage that you're having. It's a resilient backup system. So I would just like to highlight this ransomware protection data that we have, 7 capabilities that you need for a rapid and fast recovery, a broad extensive protection platform, which means that it covers all the systems that you have. It could be your legacy, or what we call a traditional or heritage service, right? Physical service, your Unixes, which you have. At the same time, it goes into your virtual workloads, it goes into your cloud workloads, your software as a service, your even to the containers, microservices, right? So it needs to have a platform that protects all this data widely. It needs to have that automated backup success testing and verification, lights off. Without simplification is what I mentioned earlier on, right? So you need to have a very simplified lights off operation of testing your backup against or checking against ransomware or malware, right? Ultra resilient backup media, air gap scenarios, going into immutable storage, hardening or encryption of the backup. That is when the bad actors got your backup data and they're trying to decrypt it, it's being encrypted in the first place, right? So they would not be able to exfiltrate your data to the public out there, all right? And it comes to the recovery that I mentioned. Instant and secure recovery is the key word when it comes to data recovery automation. All right, 3, 2, 1 backup rules. I'll just quickly mention that 3 backup copies, 2 different medias, 1 offsite. Those in white, this is the standard backup recommendation that you need to go into. The last 2 is the unique point. It has to be 1 on offline or air gap or immutable. A lot of technologies has gone into the immutability stage because of the ransomware cases that is ongoing. And last but not least, 0 error with the automated backup and recovery verification and testing, right? So a quick note on what are the capabilities that we have when it comes to the media type that a lot of our customers are leveraging on. They've heard about tape media. Again, tape media is not going away. That proves to be the best way of offline and air gap scenarios, and the ransomware will not be able to connect to your tape media, right? Obviously, there will be that recovery time that's required. So I mentioned the time of recovery is also crucial over here, right? So tape media could be one of it, but take note of the recovery time when it comes to getting your business in operations again. Replicated virtual machines into the DR site, that could be, which is power off in the first place. That could be a scenario whereby you can get off the attack of ransomware, part of that defense mechanism, because by nature, those are power off virtual machines and is not likely to be attacked because there's nothing to run or detect on that system on your disaster recovery site or the offsite that you're having. Snapshots from the storage perspective, there are different mechanism and technology that the storage vendors are providing that does provide immutability, that does provide the locking mechanism. The Cloud Connect backup, leveraging on your service provider a lot of customers does go into the service provider with our Cloud Connect backup technologies that doesn't just protect the data not to be modified. At the same time, there's insider protection. Imagine one of your employees disgruntled go into the backup system and try to delete the data away. So you don't have a data, you don't have backup data. At the same time, the production data is being compromised. Where do you get the last line of defense, right? So we have the insider protection. Even though it's deleted, it still holds somewhere whereby you may be able to recover by another of your employees. Okay, immutability backup. I've been putting a focus on that. Hardened Linux OS. If you want to get your hands on it, I wanted to get the easiest, the easily available. Linux OS does provide the capabilities for immutability, and that is one of a backup repository that a lot of our customers has been going to, right? So just some quick statistics on design for recovery. If you look at how long does it take 10 TB of data over a 10 gig link, right? So 3 hours and 50 minutes. So when you look at the time to transfer a data, 3 hours and 50 minutes, and I mentioned the data is growing, right? You have huge amount of data that you need to get the recovery back. How can I reduce this 3 hours and 50 minutes for just 10 TB? It could be probably just 10% of your data in your organization. How do I get this back within minutes? All right. And I'd just like to show this particular technical diagram, which instant recovery, one of the differentiator and unique patented technology by Veeam since our version 5. We are on version 11 right now, going to version 12. Through that 6 to 7 iteration of Veeam, we have been enhancing the instant recovery. And if you look at the multiple on the right side, right, all the data that's on the left, which is residing, it could be your cloud instances, your physical service, and then going through that compressed backup, immutability backup, and how does that translate into the right-hand side over there, whereby you do instant recovery, multiple virtual machines, regarding of the size, you get your machines up and running in minutes. Instant disk, it can go granular into just disk recovery if you're not looking at whole virtual machines recovery. Instant database recovery, granularity at the database level. At the same time, instant file service recovery, or even just a particular file recovery. So these are the instant capabilities or capabilities that has instantaneous recovery mechanisms that's built at the back end. Okay, so I want to leave you with one of our customers. Again, I've been quoting a few customers of ours that has Veeam to help them as the last line of defense to recover your data and not paying the ransom. So this is one of the recent ransomware win that we have, using Veeam Cloud Disaster Recovery solution proposed. It's oil and gas in Canada, and they have 100% of the data recovered Veeam at a timely manner. Okay, if you look at, I'll relate this back into the ransomware report again. One of the statistics that's really interesting but it's scary. Most of the we in actual fact survey about 100 respondents across the multiple personas, right, that I mentioned earlier on. 50%, most of the time, 50% of the data will be compromised by ransomware. So if you look at 10 TB, 20 TB, 30 TB, right, it could possibly be 10 or 15 TB of data to be encrypted. And how do you recover that, right? So this is one use case that I mentioned earlier on. I'll leave you with some of the ransomware resources that we have in Veeam. Okay, there is a useful assessment kit that you can go answer a couple of questions within minutes. We'll provide you the response of where should you start off with against the NIST as well as against the best practices of 32110 rules that I mentioned earlier on. We have some ransomware education website, NIST framework as mentioned earlier on, as well as this is from RSA Net Witness, ransomware resources, detecting the detection mode, the identification mode, the collaboration that we can build together with NetWitness and Veeam from a technology standpoint to defend against the ransomware attack. Okay, and with that, I'm done with my presentation, and let's go into some of the Q&A. I do see, thanks for the questions that's coming in. All right, probably if I may, can we get our speakers to put their video on, and I'll start to read out some of this question while I will assign the questions to you guys, because that's probably beyond what I can answer. So let me start off with, right, I think what tips or recommendation you can give in order to prevent things to happen? Tips to educate our students, parents, and staff about cybersecurity. I think, Jeff, you mentioned the education use case, right? I'll probably direct that question to you, Jeff. Yep.
Oh, I just think educating people and having constant education, not just cybersecurity once a year, but thinking about a culture of security, training, what to look out for, phishing emails, attachments, all those things that I mentioned and you guys also talked about that could affect companies and networks. And I just think people just need to be more aware. Awareness is the key to some of the threats.
Good note there. I think there's never enough of educating our employees or students out there. Obviously, in the education sector, you have a more widespread of not just employees, right? You have students coming in and so on. As much as the secure mechanism or your infrastructure will be, there will always be easier information that or mechanism to attack the backdoors over there, right? Okay, thanks for that, Jeff. And I'll probably direct one more question to you because it does mention the keyword of FBI there. So I reckon it's definitely for you, right? So do you think FBI can track down the cyber criminal using the Bitcoin payment address, right? Since BTC address is in the open ledger? Yeah.
Correct. So why am I getting all the questions? No. So in the case of the Colonial Pipeline attack, the FBI was able to sit on a Bitcoin wallet. They were able to track that movement of money. It requires a lot of perseverance and a lot of work to do that. It's not going to happen in all cases. They can do it, but it has to also lead to someone that they can eventually identify. And many times they bounce that around so much that the money's lost. So yes, it can be tracked, but it's not always going to be tracked.
Thanks, Jeff, for the answer to your question. Why are all the questions directing to you, right? I'd like to thank Petaro as well as Japa for giving the answers, right? So Jeff, you know who to go to, right? But appreciate the questions coming in, right? So these are really good questions. So yep, I think the rest of us will probably have to help up in answering that. Chongming, I do have a couple of questions that's coming in from you. Let me read that out. While building our capabilities to respond and recover from ransomware attacks, what can we proactively do to help the company be a lot more ready before the attack, right? I think definitely relate that to what you presented in terms of detection and the proactive way of handling or defending against ransomware. Yeah, Chongming.
Thanks, Raymond. So I think I'll answer this question in a different light because I spoke about the detection and responding, right? I'm going to add on a little bit more to what Jeff has mentioned. I think education is extremely important. So apart from technology, user education remains top priority because users are the weakest link, so to speak, right? We heard that over and over again. So user needs to be educated in social engineering attack. And how do organizations do that, right? There are solutions or there are capabilities out there, right, that allows you to, for example, subscribe to social engineering simulation that can be ran in your environment quarterly, half yearly, for instance. So that's going to definitely beef up your employees' awareness in terms of social attack. I just want to add one point, right, that I think it is also extremely, other than organization, it's extremely important for us, right, to educate our young on cybersecurity safety, right? And the onus is on us because we are living in the times where cybersecurity transformation has taken leap and bound, right? And it is onus on us to make sure that we leave a better and safer cybersecurity space for our next generation or generation that's follow. So that's one key thing, right? The other thing really important, in my opinion, is also to get C-level support and C-level endorsement in your cybersecurity and in your ransomware defense strategy, right? And how do we go about doing that, right? Because we all know that ransomware is always tied to reputational and monetary damage or repercussions, right? And those needs to be quantified to the C-level in order for it to be prioritized, and they need to be prioritized. There's a saying, seeing is believing, right? But in ransomware, we hope that we don't see it because it will be the last mile, right? It will be the last thing that can happen. So the more management is kept abreast, the better it is, right? And finally, of course, going back to the detection and response capability, I just want to add one last note, right? I think it is easy for us to decide that we want to get a particular solution to bridge a gap, but it is actually more difficult to augment the skill set gap. So when you think about capabilities, also think about skill sets, also think about the people you have. So ultimately, everything I said goes back to people, whether it's education or skill sets ramp up. Yeah.
Thanks, Chongming. I totally agree on the people part as well as the educating part, right? I'm probably a bit of a side joke over here, right? I've been called like you're not the digital native, you're the analog native, right? And obviously, digital native are the one that are probably overwhelmed, or I'm overwhelmed with all the tools that they have, right? And then with this connected world, they have anything that they can get their hands on. And Chongming is what you mentioned, right? That could possibly be that weakest link, right? Whereby it goes off undetected, right? So in a way. So thanks, Chongming. I think that's really insightful. I got to do my part and answer some of this question too. So Miss Shawara, your questions goes, yeah, that's directed to Veeam, right? So I do see the Veeam over there. Let's say that a ransomware already hit my organization and I'm a Veeam client. If you're not, better be. I'm not threatening you. So yeah, will Veeam solution back up the breach files and ransomware along the files that would be backup? That's a really good question, right? So as mentioned earlier on, right, it's not just production data that will be attacked. The backup data is also the target for a lot of the cyber criminals out there, right? And when it got into the production data or in your backup data, whereby your backup data is unclean, possibly you might have a malware, or you could possibly have a backup data being infected, right? If you're not into the immutability that I spoke about earlier on, right? So if that happens, when you do a restoration and that unclean data gets back into your environment, that could be that backdoor that will be having that repeated attack again, right? I just spoke about the triple threat ransomware attack, right? So in Veeam, we have these capabilities that call secured restore, secured and stage restore, right? So what does secure restore do, right? Before it recovers your data back into your production, you can get in your antivirus tools, you can import in some of the scripted tools that you want to clean up or to detect the backup data before it gets into the production environment. So that is a mechanism that we have built in. We have simplified that as part of a wizard-driven process whereby you can incorporate the tools to get that clean up, and before it gets into the production, you can even validate that. So a secure backup and a stage restore coming into the picture. This is one referring to the stage. That environment is totally isolated and it's cleaned up. You can get your users or you can get your security team to do a penetration test and so on before moving this back into your production data to make sure that it's totally clean. Right? So that's one of the capabilities that we have. Answering to the second question that you have over there, how can we ensure that we won't be hit again after restoring the files from the backup, right? So that's exactly how it works, right? You get your data clean back up. And obviously the best way not to be hit by a ransomware is right at the beginning where your data or your backup data lifecycle would be, right? Get into the immutability. We call it immutability everywhere. The first level of your backup, whether it be primary or your secondary backup is offsite, those have to be incorporated with immutability. And I think that would be the best approach. And then with the secure and stage restore that's coming in, you're rest assured that, yep, the backup is clean. At the same time, on top of what Chongming mentioned, right, the detect mechanism is using legitimate processes that's attacking. In Veeam, we do provide monitoring and tracking of the backup data to ensure there isn't any anomalies. So take, for example, when I'm performing a backup on a daily basis and a sudden spike of my incremental backup that's supposed to be 100 gig and it's going to be 1 TB, which is bigger than my production data, right? How does this anomalies resulted into? That could be a cyber threat attack. Reason being why? The production data is encrypted. That's the reason why I couldn't find any incremental backup. I couldn't do a dedupe, I couldn't do a compression. So that's one detection that our mechanism or the backup mechanism is doing to help check on anomalies on top of CPU utilization, on top of network utilization, as well as this IOPS. We do track all these matrices as our form of proactively knowing a ransomware is in action. Okay, so I hope that answers the questions. I know that we have stretched our hours. I think the rest of the questions that we are not able to answer, rest assured, we will come back to you. We got your contact details. We'll answer that back to you. So with that, the rewarding part is coming in. So get your mobile phones ready. You're going to have a QR code that you'll be able to scan, and then you got to answer the questions, and the first 30 with the completed and correctly answered questions will get a limited edition hoodie. All right, so get ready for it. 3, 2, 1, 10. I got to say 10, right? Because there's our best backup method. All right, here goes. All right, so while you guys are scanning this and trying to put across the answers to this, I'd just like to thank all our speakers over here. Jeff, appreciate the late night, very good information and details, not just from a technology standpoint, right? I guess our audience might be tired of hearing all the technologies, but I'd like to stress that technology is a key critical part to your ransomware defense mechanism, right? But thanks for sharing all the insights in regards to what you're seeing out there from an FBI agent experience perspective. And Chongming, appreciate the technology fill-in from a proactive and detection way where a net witness RSA is able to provide. And again, as mentioned earlier on, NIST framework is not done or completed within one party. There's also the people aspect that we talk about, right? But NIST framework should be the right start for you. And that's just the beginning. And then fine-tuning all this will help in having the best and ultimate mechanism against the constant war of fighting against ransomware. All right, with that, I think we're all good. You guys should be answering the questions right now. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for listening in. The 1.5 hours is really enjoyable and insightful and enriching for myself. I hope it's the same thing for you guys. So I'll close the session now, and then we'll get back to you on the 30 winners. Definitely we'll do that. And thank you very much. And have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.